Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Oh, hi, Stephanie. Oh, so glad you're here. And Blake's here. My, that's cool. Hello, everybody. Lots of faces we know.
Hi, Elizabeth. Good to see you.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen Elizabeth in
Yeah,
ages.
I know. I just saw her.
Oh, hello. Have you been traveling, Elizabeth? Oh, you're muted.
Hi, so happy to be here with you.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hello. We had lots of people sign up. There's Cliff is here. Hello, Cliff. Yeah, but it's also July, so lots of people will not be here, but they'll watch the recording as well. It's great we have these recordings because people really do watch them. We check to see, and they really do watch them, which is great.
Hmm.
So let's, while people are still joining us, let's start with saying a nice, warm, beautiful hello to our bodies. Yeah, practicing that revolutionary pause, as Mary Gendlin named it. So Mary Gendlin was Jean's partner in life and the first director of the Focusing Institute. And she wrote this beautiful paper about the revolutionary pause. Because it really is, right? This is the beginning of coming inside. Just starting to slow things down a little bit. And connecting in with this deeper place of knowing inside our bodies. And maybe just be curious about where you notice your attention lands in your body. For a lot of us, it goes to our upper chest. I can see as I open my eyes, Stephanie's holding her upper chest just like I do in this moment. And then just getting a sense of where are you drawn to in your body right now. And if that part of your body could send a message to you, what might be the beginning of that message? And so this might be a place that you want to kind of bookmark and come back to another time. Say, oh, there's that place. Maybe later today, you can spend some time there. So today we're going to talk about addiction. And trauma. And how they go together in the body. Yeah, so just notice what happens in your body when we bring in those words. And so with a curious and an open and a compassionate attitude, you can slowly begin to open your eyes. And just send a friendly message to our group if you feel like it. To say, hello, here we are. Hi, Jackie. And Elspeth and Nina. And Gunther and Marika and It's lovely to see everybody. Okay. So today we have the wonderful Travis Goodman with us, who I have finally, I hope, stopped calling Trevor. So sorry. The only thing that felt okay about that is that you told me I wasn't the only one that did that. So Travis is a Felt Sense Polyvagal Model facilitator, and some of you will know what that means. And for some of you, it will be new. And so what that means for us at PVI is that Travis has completed the 3 courses that are involved in the Felt Sense Polyvagal Model training. And he's qualified to be starting to really use the model. And you are using the model in the work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, you are also a licensed marriage and family therapist. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
And a focusing trainer, which was part of the training that you did, a polyvagal informed focusing trainer. And you also have a new, or you changed the name, podcast, Integrated Man Project, which I love. I love that name. And always are so excited and happy about having men working with men in the work that we do. Yeah. So what else would you like to say about yourself? And Rashawn, can you spotlight us? And Travis and I are going to hang out for a while like we do and talk together. And then we're going to open it up for all of us to be here together.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for the welcome and the invitation. And it's always good to be here and have conversation. Always good to see beautiful faces that I've gotten to know over the past few years, really through the work that you've done, Jan, and made some amazing friends. And I I saw Robert's new white headphones, which look great. He's been my focusing partner for ever since the beginning with you, Jan. So always good to see friendly faces, and Elizabeth, and it's just good. I love the community that you're creating. I feel so connected to something outside of myself, and I think that's what I love about the work that you're doing, that we're doing, is that it's not about just what I'm doing, but about what we are doing and how we can support each other. A bit more about me, of how this work, yes, I do all these things. I'm also certified in EMDR, which I love using. And we're going to talk a bit about that more today, about how I'm integrating all these things.
Yeah.
And something else that I think is really that pushes me to continue growing is I'm also a dad of 3, married, and all these things have challenged me. I think one of the biggest challenges is becoming a father and realizing all the stuff that I thought I knew, how much I don't know. Even with all my training, all the stuff I've read, all the books I've read, I mean, books on books on books and more books over there. And it's like, yeah, but how do I actually apply it? And I think a lot of the work I've been doing over the past few years, ever since diving more deeply into polyvagal theory and the felt sense, is it's made me a better parent, better father, more in tune. And I knew it more logically, I think, previously to doing the work with you, more in my head. And it's really pushed me to be more in my body. And the more I've done that, the more I realize the importance of the integration of our body, and how wise it is, and how much more information it's trying to provide to us, and learning to understand the language of the body, and the body of others. And so I think, just to kind of round me out as a human, like, these are things that I'm applying, not in just my clinical practice, but in my everyday life with my kids, with my wife, with my friends, with just even when I'm in the office alone or in the car. Like, it's a continual practice. And I think the thing that I always come back to is, like, I'm consistently practicing this, of slowing down, and that power of that pause, and how powerful that pause is, and learning to kind of rest and be still so we can hear. And anyway, so it's really revolutionary. I'm really grateful for all the wisdom you've imparted to me, and I'm just excited to be here. So
excited to have you. And it's true, we have created a beautiful community. You can feel that, and when we come together. Okay, so we talked about maybe we would do, because some people won't know what the four-circle harm reduction practice is. Lots of people will, but it never hurts, as we know, to go over things again. And each time we do that, something new can come. And so let me just share screen, and I'm just going to share with you the four circles. Oh, my screen sharing is paused. That's weird. Does anybody see that? I'm going to stop. Try that again. That was weird. Oh, see what happens now. Okay. Everybody see?
Yep, looks great.
Right. So, we work together in our Felt Sense Polyvagal community, and I had started off with 3 circles.
Mhm.
And those 3 circles originally, that was adapted from the work of Patrick Cairns. This was his kind of 3-circle practice that he created. And I took that and basically integrated the autonomic nervous system into it. And then Robert ฤguchi, who Travis referred to, he said to me one day, we need the 4th circle. And I said, what is that 4th circle? And as soon as he started to explain it, it began to really make sense to me that, of course, we have these deeper, expansive kind of spiritual or connected to the land experiences, what I think Dan Siegel calls transpirational experiences. So we added a 4th circle, thanks to Robert, who's here today. So I like to start in the middle, or the inner circle there. That's what we call fixate in the nervous system. And this is where we help our clients when they're ready, and when they feel able to really make a commitment to reducing harm around some of the behaviors that they have found helpful, but are now finding harmful, to begin to really quantify them. Don't you find, Travis, that it's really important for people not to just say, oh, I don't want to eat so much sugar, but to really work with our people to say, well, let's see if we can make that really a kind of behavioral piece there, a step that you can hold yourself in a gentle, loving way, but a firm way accountable to, right?
Yeah.
So you'll see when we go through, and Travis is going to give us a nice case example, but I just want to go through it quickly so you get a sense. So this inner circle is where we put the behaviors that we want to stop or to reduce harm around. The second circle are basically the triggered states, right? Of flight, fight, and then folding in and shutting down. So what are the things in your life that activate the inner circle behaviors? And so they can range from things like having a fight with your partner, your boss gives you grief at work, your kids are screaming their heads off, and you don't know what's wrong. Stress in life, COVID issues were a lot of what we saw in working with clients over these past years. Then the third circle are basically the ventral practices, experiences in life that bring us a sense of grounding and connection with other people. So the things that you're engaged in your life that bring you a sense of closeness and community, like right now, what we're doing right now is a third circle practice of being together, sharing ideas, challenging each other, but in a way that feels grounded in ventral, enough ventral, with some fired up energy and some oftentimes slowing down energy as well. And then this 4th circle that maybe Robert will say a little bit about when we get there as well, Robert, because I know you're here, of these deeper, really pausing experiences that are often, say, trance-inducing, things that really help us, processes in the body that go very deep into levels of experiencing that Gendlin talked about in terms of level 6 and 7 in the experiencing scale, for those of you that know that work. So I think that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Get a little sense of it. The 4 circles is available on my website, as are the models that we use of the nervous system and lots of other handouts. So, Travis, do you want to maybe share a little bit about how are you working with addiction in your practice? And we talked a little bit before we started with people today that I was sharing with you that I'm really on a mission. I do share with Janina Fisher, who is going to be with us in Embodied Dialogues August 9th, which is just amazing. Yeah, she's coming August 9th to be with us. So put that on your calendar. And she and I both totally share and hold very dear this really important, and of course, 𝗘𝗵𝗹𝗀𝗃. There's Janina, the living legacy of trauma. Janina is, as I introduced her at a polyvagal conference, she's a legend. She's a legend. She started off early on with Bessel van der Kolk, and she was one of Judith Herman's first students. So she is a legend, and she's a lovely human being.
Yeah.
So she and I both share this real passion for getting the message out to people that if you're working with trauma, you are working often with addiction. And I think, as you were saying, people are put off by working with addiction because it feels like it's too hard. And what I find is people get into power struggles a lot with their clients, and it's not a nice experience, right? You end up feeling like a parent.
Yeah.
But if you work in a polyvagal informed way, through the body, it's not a power struggle. You're working with the body and the body's need for safety. So share with us a bit more about how you're doing that in your work.
Yeah, so I think, and I love this flip chart, by the way. Awesome. It's a great flip chart. Highly recommend it. I do work with clients and stuff, and you show them. It's amazing. Her work's great. Anyway, I pulled it out because like, oh, I have Janina Fisher stuff.
Yes, she really has contributed so much in terms of understanding trauma and the neurophysiology of trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super helpful. And helpful for your visual clients. I think it makes it easy to show people, and they're like, oh, I get it now. And so how I use it, I mean, really, it's a lot of integrative work. And I watched one you were talking to earlier. Oh gosh, who was it? It might have been an IFS person, I think, recently.
Steve Spikes?
Yeah, it was like the last one you just did. And you were talking about how we integrate the model, how actually they can enhance each other. That when we take polyvagal or focusing or IFS or EMDR or whatever, that we also want to give credit to the core of the models and what they do for us, and also how they could work together to actually enhance it. Because we don't want to water it down. Like I think you were talking, and I think actually you were being interviewed. Now that I think about it, and you were talking about we don't want to water down the models, but we want to use them to enhance and really understand the nuance. And that's what I've been really doing with the work in my practice, has been how do I use these frameworks to really better help the person in front of me. And first and foremost, the most important thing is, my presence, your presence, like who you are, and bringing yourself to the room. And that's, from Rogers to Gendlin to, I mean, so many of the, mothers and fathers, so to speak, of therapy, psychology, and philosophy have talked about your embodied presence. You is the most important tool. And all these other things, I think, are just kind of helpful avenues and roadmaps of how to get some help. And so with addiction specifically, and even before I was trained with you, Jan, I always felt, and I learned this in grad school, and the grad school I went to really looked at addiction from not the medical model at all. They talked about the medical model and the history.
Wow.
Yeah, that's Cal State Fullerton. That's where I went for my graduate school in Southern California.
So unusual.
Yeah.
So how did they talk about addiction?
They used like more motivational interviewing and some other forms, and talked about how it's not so much a brain disease, right? It's not this medical. And again, they gave us the history in class. So it was really, really well done. They weren't trying to give bias. They're talking about just this, how things have developed and evolved. And they
Mm,
looked at it from a more holistic approach. And I remember that in class. And this is, before I did work and graduate student back in 2012, I think.
yeah.
Because I graduated in 2014. And it was really a helpful perspective. And that kind of stuck with me. And then as I began working with people, how I saw addiction, quote unquote, was that really we could use anything and become addicted to it. Now, to varying degrees, to varying severities, and certain things we use obviously can cause a whole lot more harm in our bodies or those around us. But I always saw it as a means of trying to like deal with pain or deal with stress or deal with overwhelm or anxiety or frustration or something. And when I started doing the training with you, it kind of I fell right into it. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I've been thinking. And now I have a little bit more language around it. And now it makes even more sense with the polyvagal lens and this
Mm.
perspective. And,
So
when
let me stop you for a sec for our
yeah,
listeners. So we're
yeah,
saying here that the polyvagal lens is about understanding the adaptive features,
hmm
right, of addictions. That addictions are adaptive ways of managing in the nervous system when we don't have enough safety.
hmm
Right, right.
right,
So in that trauma feedback loop, addictions act as state regulation strategies, as Steve Porges would say.
hmm
They shift us back and forth from the sympathetic state of overwhelm to the shutting down state of numbing to help with pain.
yeah,
But they also shift us back from numbing into feeling again.
hmm
Without the felt sense, though, right?
yeah,
Without the connection to body and ventral energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's definitely a disconnect there for sure. And it's often, the more I learned about the polyvagal, felt sense polyvagal model and all the work that Dr. Stephen Porges did, it kind of again gave language to what I've always kind of felt and thought working with clients. And in my own head, I had different language, but then when I read it, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I've been thinking and doing. It's just now it's a little more structured and there's a model behind it, right?
Yeah.
And that was helpful and affirming to know that I was onto something and that, hey, it wasn't just me, but other smarter people than me were onto something. And to say, okay, that helps me reinforce that I'm on the right track. And to learn
Well,
more.
so there's something there too that's really important to unpack a little more.
Hmm,
There's something you always knew.
hmm,
So if we paused there,
yeah,
could you get a sense of a little bit more about that something? That something is one of those felt sense words, that
yeah.
something you always knew, that when I started to talk about it and you read more with Steve's work, Porges, that you thought, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it comes from my own story and my own family's divorce and dealing with a mom who got depressed and my
Mm.
brother who was really angry and I was the older brother who had to keep it all together. And so how I dealt with things, was to kind of also shut down parts of myself and to keep it together. My dad left and then mom was depressed. She was out of it. And this is senior year of high school. And my brother is 2 years younger, a lot of like outwardly anger. And I was more of just kind of composed. And so feeling in my gut now, as you talked about that's what brought me back down right away to when I was 17. So felt it in my stomach and remembering that time and realizing that I too had to I turned to things to deal with my own nervous system, often
Mhm.
by busyness and work,
Mhm.
performance, um,
So there's
distractions.
that connection with your own experiencing of it.
hmm
And then there's another piece that there's something about you and your experience, that what we were saying about this way of understanding addiction,
mm
this adaptive quality, this way of appreciating something there that doesn't fit with the medical model.
hmm
And it made sense to you. Maybe you don't quite know the words for that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I think the medical model to me, the word I get is just it's the lack of humanness.
Hmm.
Um, and while it's helpful to understand I always felt there was some separation between that and the human itself. It felt more of, it felt to me more like, for lack of a better word, label. So it's a label, therefore it's a label I can, in a way, other the person. I can other
So
them.
there's a couple of things there that, boy, this could be such rich focusing time, right?
Mm.
The othering, the humanness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And that humanness, there's when you say that, my felt sense goes to, yes,
Mm.
it's about kind of what's when Steve Porges talks about what it means to be human,
Mm.
and something about that which really honors the wisdom of the body and the adaptive survival features
Yeah.
of addiction.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a very core piece here, right? And it's one, when you talk about presence, that we really have to, I think, pay more attention to, that what's common in us in the polyvagal language and in felt sense polyvagal work is really believing in that
Mm.
way in which our body is so beautifully designed to help us to survive.
Mm. Yeah.
And so you wouldn't call something that has adaptive features an illness. They're two different paradigms.
Mm-hmm.
Make any sense anymore.
Mm-mm. It doesn't.
That's why I
No.
don't use the word disorders when I'm talking about even things like dissociation, which
Right.
addictions very efficiently trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dissociation is an adaptive quality in the body. Yeah, it becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where our work comes in, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I too don't use the word disorder unless I have to do a bill for it, right? That's different. The billing code. Then I use what was in a way to work it so I get the care for the client in front of me, if I need to put it into that lens, and that's easy. But looking at it from adaptive survival response, to me, it makes sense why. If I look at it from, oh, no wonder why you did this. No wonder why. This was too painful or not safe enough. So this made more sense logically and bodily.
And bottom.
Um, and and often too, it's not always a logical, conscious choice. It's often this kind of drive, this like an inner driving force that pushes to do something because the body's seeking to kind of manage and deal or cope or distract or shut down or do something with this tremendous amount of pain or hurt or overwhelm. And
Yes.
so when I say if that's a brain problem or it's a disease, it's like, well, how is, like you said, how is it helpful? But if I
Mhm.
look at it and it's helpful having kids, if I look at a small child, you know, when I see them and what they do, it, it- you that person in front of me was a small child once and had innocence. And at one point, that child had to learn to adapt in their environment through addiction to cope. And then I always want to be curious, well, what was that environment like and why?
Yeah.
And it makes sense why he did that because as a child, one of the most, maybe some people can relate to working with kids. I don't specialize working with kids now. I have
It's
three
good
kids
to
of my
know.
own, so that's my specialty. It's just like I have enough child
Good
work when
enough of that at home.
I have enough, and that's a whole full-time part, more than full-time job if you think about it. But early in my career working with kids, one of the most difficult things was knowing that this kid had to go home to an environment that they couldn't control.
Yeah.
And
Well,
in my
that,
first work was in kind of an area that had a lot of gangs, a lot of gang violence, a lot of trauma, and so I knew these kiddos were coming in and I knew they were going home that they can't change that.
yeah.
So no, and then I look at their behavior and then they be coming in for behavioral problems or ODD or, you name it, right? And when I started seeing these kids, they just needed safety. So often I would just sit there, play games with them and create safety and play
Mhm. Oh,
handball and
yeah.
just be present. And they would talk to me and
Yeah.
they would just talk about stuff at home. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, holy, you know,
Yeah.
insert expletive swear word, like in my, like, you're going through so much. No wonder why, you have 10 men have been in your mom's life, or you have 10 siblings from 10 different people, dad's in jail, brothers violent, or there's been abuse, molestation. I mean, everything you think of. And I'm like, this kid, they don't have options, really.
Bodies are designed, they're physiologically designed to shift back and forth. And so eventually these kids learn that these addictive behaviors will help them to be able to do that.
Right.
So you were sharing how you were working with a client last week. That was an interesting thing that I thought it would be cool to share with people, and lots of questions too, so we can open it up. We can just kind of do a little touch in today. There's so much we could talk about here. But I love that what you were telling me before we'd started, maybe.
Yeah. So something else that I have a real heart for, men's work, and it's a big passion of mine. And a lot of men, and I won't go too much into it because that's a whole other conversation, but essentially a lot of men have been socialized culturally around a lot of shame and guilt around emotionality and vulnerability. And so I think a lot of men, in a way, that even emotions have been traumatized around emotions, and have had to adapt and use addiction as means to deal with like any normal emotion. But to them, it's, I can't feel this, I shouldn't feel this, or I'm wrong for it. So they turn to other things to deal with these different emotional states. And this leads into this client I'm working with, which is pretty common with a lot of men that I work with, which is, I'm hoping one day we'll change that a bit. That's my heart, is that we can hopefully heal this next generation for the next boys that are being raised, that we're creating more safety and connection around what it means to be masculine, and around emotionality and all these things, and body work. And so this guy I was working with, who's in his mid-40s, dad of two, came in initially to see me. His son had some cancer, and so he came in, and initially I was going to deal with that with him, working with a lot of just the trauma of that and the overwhelm. And as I started working with him, not too long into it, into the second session, we started to see some of the addiction stuff come up, and sharing, and that this is a lifelong thing, and it goes back to his childhood, and a whole lot of trauma in early childhood, and finding addiction. And one big one I hear a lot of men is pornography.
Oh yeah, that's huge. We got to do some work there, Travis, in this spring.
It's such a big one.
Yeah. It's a real epidemic.
It really is. And at the time, though, that was safe and an escape and calming of his nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there was no one to turn to. The theme I heard when he was young, there was no one to turn to deal with how he was doing, because any adult he turned to is he became the adult for the other parent. And so he was dealing with all this toxicity, poison, acid on both ends. And so, what do you do with that as a small child when he needed it? He would just cope, and then he did school, and he did really well in school. That's also how he coped, to really focus on education, and then pornography. That was kind of his ways of dealing, and which is not uncommon. I've heard that quite often.
It's very common. Yeah.
Very, very common. And so when I did this history and understanding that and the narrative and kind of what's been going on, and then to today, in this present, how he's coping and just dealing with the trauma of his family life is a lot of busyness, a lot of working, overworking, to keep his mind busy, and then still pornography, and then often distractions like social media, just kind of being distracted on TV, social media, anything to keep the mind occupied, right? And so how I began working with him is just understanding the story behind it, being curious about the use and what it's doing for him, the benefit, because I want to know the benefit. I want to know how it helps him. Don't want to shame it, because he already has shame around it. Why would I shame him? I'm not gonna, and telling him to stop is not going to be effective either in the moment. But I want to understand, help me understand it. What does it do when you turn to it? What's happening? And trying to, get to the story. And then really validate the use of it, validate the need it's trying to fill, even if temporary. Because it's filling a need. It's filling a bodily adaptive need. It's filling an emotional relief. It's a soul relief to some degree, right? And the whole thing, mind, body, and soul. And finding that this is the best way that he learned to adapt to his environment as a young boy and even to now. So we kind of carry that in. As a lot of us that have worked with people, we know that. And so validating that story of like, well, it makes sense why you're still doing it because this is what you've always done. And this is kind of your tool. These are your tools you've had. And so to do anything different, you wouldn't do that really right now until you came to me. And so we started doing that work, understanding it. And then I began working on him with some significant trauma in early childhood and using EMDR, and really targeting specific memories that came up. I would also include some focusing with him if we didn't know what to do. And focusing helped me find a bodily experience that then sometimes I'd find, and if we were there, I would then incorporate EMDR in that moment. It's like I would then turn the tappers on. I have little tappers, and then allow the pre-processing sometimes. And so if anything, focusing enhanced EMDR and helped me go deeper into the body.
Yes, focusing does that.
Yeah, way deeper.
Everything to go to the felt sense.
It really enhanced EMDR. Like I saw it like take it to another level, and they kind of work together. Because sometimes I would be doing an EMDR reprocessing session, and then I would land somewhere, and then I would shift into focusing because where we were, I needed to kind of slow down even more, and then reversing it. But more recently, what we were talking about, and he's done a lot of work, and he's aware, and he wants to change for his kids and be more holistically healthy, but he still has these, I guess, adaptive urges, so to speak, to when he still feels overwhelmed with life or whatever, he still turns to these things. In fact, we had a recent session, he brought it back up, and I could tell there's a bit of maybe shame around there. And so I decided to just strictly focusing and go into his body. And this was an interesting session with him, because as we're doing it, we have a lot of good rapport, and he trusts me, and which is obviously vitally important for your client, whoever you're working with, to trust you, because I'm journeying with him, and that's important. I'm not leaving him. I'm in it with him in this session. I have to be. And that's that co-regulation piece of the felt sense, is that I'm able to be and feel and bring myself and my experience into the room with him, which creates safety, right? When he knows that I'm there, when he senses my presence, not this disconnected, being behind a couch and that trope, right? I'm not the flat person, the flat affect, emotionless, but no, very much engaged. And obviously it has to be effective. It's not about me, but about him. And so we're doing into his body, and he talked about in his heart, and then he feels in his hands, and he's kind of in this position, kind of sitting back, and like you can't really see it, but kind of holding his foot like this and kind of rubbing. He's kind of sitting, and he's going inward. We're slowing down, and I'm like, okay, let's just go with that feeling. And what is it, asking what does it need, and kind of going, what's the sense? Why is it so stressed? Why is it so tight? And he was doing there, and he was in that moment, and then he opened his eyes, did this motion, hands, kicked his foot off, and then leaned back and crossed arms and leg and just shook his head. And so it hit his point that it was too much for him. It surpassed his window of tolerance, to quote Dan Siegel, in that moment, that he needed to take a break and get some distance from it, which we do with focusing. And what you do, Jan, is what's the right distance that feels safe enough to kind of observe or come close to
his body showed you. This is the right distance.
He's like, and so I'm like, okay, I'm like, what happened there? And we had a dialogue, and I'm like, do you mind if we go back in a little bit and maybe see if we could find the right distance?
So there you're really titrating. You see how skilled Travis is, right? Using so many different skills here and different ways of being, but in a very smooth and beautiful way. So then you challenge him a bit, because you know him, and you could feel in your body, you could probably play with this edge a little bit and get away with it. I love this, because this is how our clients grow. Right? So you said, okay, so maybe we could just go in there and work with it.
And he said, and because I have the relational equity with him, I have the trust that, he's willing to trust me again to go back in, right?
That's beautiful.
Which is great that he, that is, and I agree, it is beautiful that we could have that. And I'm like, hey, let's go again. So he closed his eyes again. I'm like, okay. And then I asked the classic question, what distance would feel safe enough right now between you and this feeling?
Gendlin question. Yeah.
Yep, Gendlin question. And so he gave it to me, and at first he would, I could see his face and kind of just, not really unsure, and I'm like, okay, and I just kind of watching and just kind of being and waiting and not pushing, because I want him to feel right. And this was by, we're getting close to the end of the session, and so I knew that we wouldn't go back super deep. I was just trying to get a sense of how close can we get to this right now, knowing that over the next few sessions, we're going to start to kind of slowly titrate closer to this thing.
Beautiful. And you're helping his body to work in the session. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not too much because you're watching the time.
Yeah. Because I knew that I don't want to get into somewhere that I can't give ample time to sit with it.
Exactly.
Because I don't want, because that could be, not saying it would be, but that could be really not helpful in the moment. It could be kind of a not skillful practice. So I just wanted to ask.
It would be unsafe.
Right. So I wanted to get what distance. And I kind of gave him, right here. Do you want it kind of, 10 feet? Do you want it on a TV in a different room? Like, do you want it somewhere else?
Up with the balloon out in the ocean. Yeah.
And then he said actually in the corner of the room. I'm like, okay, which corner? I'm like, and he opened his eyes, like, which corner? Because I don't know, there's 4 corners.
Yeah.
And he was kind of thinking, I'm like, the corner, behind me. He's like, yes, the corner behind you. So me between the thing. So now I thought that was interesting.
That was beautiful because you're protecting him in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And also just for our audience, what are you doing there in terms of steps of focusing? You're teaching him how to clear space.
Yes.
Right? Step 1, through titrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's doing it with his body.
Yes.
And spatially in the room.
Yes. And when he said that behind me, I'm like, what is that like right now? He said, that feels better.
Yeah.
So, and in a way I kind of jokingly said, I'm here between you and it, right? He said, yeah. So we had this agreement and laugh and chuckle that it felt much more, it felt safe that I was in a way standing between him and it.
Travis, I'm going to stop you. So,
Sure.
Because I want us to go to the audience, but I just love the way that you work. I mean, I would feel so safe if I had a problem to come to you. And I love this idea, like there's a real mensch in you, this man who is fully, really present and really trying hard to be, and not even trying, but being very authentic.
Yeah.
And also being a leader. I love the way you're doing this as a therapist. You're leading, and you're when you need to, and stepping back when it's not about you. But this way of protecting him from what his body went to like that is very beautiful.
Thanks, Jan.
Really beautiful. So we could just keep going. And
I know.
Because we have future plans in how we'll work together. But let's go back. Rashawn, can you take us back to our wonderful community? People are sharing lots of things. Great. And we've got less than 15 minutes. I know we talk a lot.
It's hard not to. It's just so fun to explore, and
it is, isn't it? It's fun.
Yeah.
Imagine having fun talking about trauma and addiction. But we do. Yeah. Peg, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I just want to honor Travis because I love your compassion, which in IFS, I'm trained as a sex therapist through IFS, and I utilize IFS, sensory motor, all this stuff. Never mind. But what's important here is Travis is really showing up in a way that a mentor in my sex therapy training, 𝗘𝗺𝗯𝗏, who's in San Diego, treats men. He primarily treats men with out of control sexual behavior, which is now known as problematic sexual behavior. And a lot of the community of the world thinks of it as sex addiction. I put that literally in quotes because what's happening through an IFS lens, I actually map the system through, and I'm trained in polyvagal, of course. And so I literally have them, and I'm a sand therapist. So I have miniatures. So I go in that room and I literally take my tray, which is a certain size, and I divide it into 4. So I line this with IFS, and PVT. So I teach them, like in IFS, self would be like ventral vagal. And then 𝗘𝗺𝗍𝗓, of course, I studied under, well, not of course, but I studied under 𝗘𝗺𝗓 for a long time, who is IFS trained and somatically trained, very similar to the path I follow. And then I separate the center into two sections, and I call that sympathetic, or I call that with a protection, with IFS. And I divide that into with a dotted line because it's very much based in sympathetic. And then at the end, I base dorsal vagal, and I let them choose miniatures that represent aspects of themselves in those states. And I will always start, like Debs maps the system, and I map it from base, dorsal, sympathetic, and I go sympathetic, really reactive, which is a protector in IFS, a firefighter. And then I go, this is more management, which is sympathetic in a little different energy, map that, and they get it. And then I teach them about ventral and, of course, self and IFS, but they really get it. And what I love, what you said, Travis, was, or somebody said about motivational interviewing. And Doug literally uses that in his training of how to treat problematic sexual behavior. And I love it because I've applied it to all people with come in with really avid, like whether it's eating, doesn't matter what the person comes in for any kind of addiction or behavior. And I love 𝗘𝗺𝗯𝗓, which I've learned so much from. But what is happening here is exactly what you're saying. And they're in an IFS lens or PVT, they're in a really reactive sympathetic state. So I just want to honor what you are talking about. And Travis, I wanted to give my heart to you because your compassion, your self energy or ventral energy is so present, and the safety you provide is beyond. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks
Thank you.
very much, Peg, for those comments. I also did a podcast with 𝗘𝗺𝗂𝘁 where we talked about addiction and IFS parts and FSPM. You can find that. I think it's
No,
on
I
my-
actually saw it. I was on that. I actually
on
saw it.
my-
Yeah, so she's wonderful, wonderful.
Yes, yeah, she's great. I love her. Okay, Davis. Hello. We had an email exchange.
Hi. Yes, that was
Hi.
me. Nice to see
How
you.
is you? Nice to see you too.
Yeah, and thank you both so much for being here. This has been wonderful. I wanted to ask, so Jane, I believe it was you who said earlier in description of addiction that it is essentially a state change propeller, but in the absence of the felt sense. And so I'd love to hear you both speak a little bit more on that. And I suppose my specific question is, by that description of a state change propeller in the absence of the felt sense, do you mean that it's lacking an essential kind of conscious component, like conscious awareness of embodied experience? Or
Well,
what else would you say about that?
Yeah, by state regulation strategies. This is really a Steve Porges term. And what it means is that basically addictions function as ways of shifting autonomic state between two dysregulated states, one of the sympathetic flight fight. So you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed or rageful, and then you drink a bottle of wine and the body shuts down into a dorsal state. Or it can go the other way. If we're feeling really numb and disconnected from the body and you cut the body, for some people, that cutting or the seeing of blood will stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. And so it's a way for the nervous system to shift back and forth through using addictive behaviors or substances.
Mm.
And
I would-
of course, we don't use addictions when we're in a ventral state. We don't need them. So they occur in that trauma feedback loop between sympathetic and dorsal sympathetic. Travis?
And something that I've seen too is it feels often, especially from that shift from sympathetic dorsal, it feels better. It feels relieving.
Yeah,
and that's
there's
what
a
they're looking
predictive
for.
shift.
It's
There's
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, and then, but and to answer your question, Davis, is that it's also how I've seen is that it's, and this is taken from Stephen Porges' work, Jan's work, is that it's disconnected from the body and in a dissociation and numbing, and there's no health, growth, and restoration in that state. It's still a survival state. And so in true ventral, we're having health, growth, restoration. We're connected to ourselves and our body and those around us. And so that addictive shift, while feels relieving to that overwhelm, the anxiety, the stress, it's not allowing the body to actually really heal or grow, right? It's actually stopping it and just keeping it just in survival. But that's, for some people, I'm thinking this gentleman I worked with, that's kind of all he knows, really. Like in his body, it's like, I just know that this feels better than this. This feels calming than this. And so, but when I get him into ventral, there's a whole different shift for him. It's very different. It's because he's connected. He feels safe enough. He's aware of what's happening in his body, in his emotions. He's able to have a clean narrative, kind of top down, bottom up, and be able to move through it versus just shutting things off. And so it's a very different feeling too, even in the room, that you'll feel the difference with the individual.
Yeah, because in that trauma feedback loop of sympathetic, dorsal, dorsal sympathetic, there is no felt shift. There is no deep experiencing in the body because it's too painful to go there. It hasn't been safe to go there. So the body unconsciously shifts you into those defensive states to survive. Make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I see there are other questions, so I'll just bookmark a kind of a next step in those questions that I'd love to chat with both of you about in the future, which is exploring safe versions of each of those states, the blended states as well as the movement in them that is not, is not addictive and does include some degree of felt sense. And then, the spectrum that exists in each of those, amongst each of the states of the autonomic hierarchy. Feel really curious about that too. So thanks for answering the question.
Yeah, blended states are very interesting. We're doing a series actually on them. Tomorrow I'm doing one. You can check, you can find it in my newsletter. Carol, I don't think I know you or I've heard from you. Carol, have we connected?
No, actually, I think I've just been stalking you all on Facebook and through the
Nice
newsletter.
To see you.
Nice to meet you. Can you hear me? I think my speaker's off. Can you hear me? Okay. So I wanted to ask, first of all, I totally agree with the bottom-up approach and integrating the understanding of the body with addiction. It makes so much sense to me. How is it different? And this is probably too much of a question, but I'd really like you to address this in the future, maybe through email. When there's illness like colitis or cancer or chronic pain, how do you safely embody the felt sense? And with the desire to avoid, which is addiction, and numbing and coping, it's a strategy. What about that chronic pain? What about that cancer? And just wondering how to explore that.
Yeah, it's a really great question because they often go together, right? People who have chronic become addicted. Anybody, Travis, do you want to answer that? Or is there anybody here that specializes in working with chronic pain through a polyvagal lens?
I do.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Peg. So sorry. I'm over here. Like, I don't know where.
Oh, okay. You work with chronic pain and addiction?
I do. And yes, I do. And actually what is happening is the body is literally saying no. So they're not, the body works in metaphor. And so there's a way of being in the body or talking to, you can literally talk to the body and it will respond. So it's kind of an unconscious thing. So actually I do that. And
I also work basically with our basic practices of connecting into clearing space so that a person could find a place on the body that feels pain-free, like the tip of their nose or their earlobes or their toes. Often people can find some place that feels like an okay place to start. So that can be, just quickly to say, because we're running out of time, that can be a very helpful thing, is to just see if the tip of the nose feels like an okay place to start. The other thing is getting into a kind of paradigm shift, because in traditional models, you know, where there's a war against illness rather than really appreciating that your body, that we love our bodies and our bodies need help. Two little things I'd say. People feel free to connect up with each other too after, you know, it's all about making community and learning from each other. So anybody that hasn't asked a question or made a comment that would like to say something, or maybe is there something in the chat that we can...
Senta, do you have your hand up? I think.
I know, but I know Senta really
Oh.
well, and I'm wanting, and bear with me, Senta, I'm really trying to make a space for somebody that hasn't spoken or would like to ask a question.
I
Could you
wouldn't mind jumping in real fast, if
that?
that's okay.
Yeah, who's that?
Yosef.
Oh,
Hi,
hi,
Jen.
Joseph.
How you doing?
Oh, hi.
Hey, Travis. Hi. I wonder if you can talk about, I don't know if you can finish it now, but how much do men need to be in a dorsal state? I have tons of men who come to me and they have the addictions and they're shutting themselves down constantly. And it's almost as if they look at you like you have three heads when you tell them this is an abnormality or this is connecting them. I was wondering just how much naturally do perhaps men more than ladies or people in general need to actually be in a shutdown state to rejuvenate and come back to the flock and connect?
That's a good question. I have probably a lot of ideas on it. I'm sure Jan does too. But in short, I mean, in dorsal, it's not really rejuvenate. According to polyvagal theory, dorsal is not a rejuvenative state.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, but dorsal is not a state of health, growth, and restoration. That's only through ventral that we actually heal and grow. Dorsal is survival. Dorsal is shutting down and numbing to survive. And so men, I think, have, in my experience, have used it a lot because that's what they know to keep going, to shut, to numb, to keep moving, but it's not regenerative. It's not actually healing or growing. But
It
that's
can
what they've
be,
learned.
it can, but Travis, let's be careful. It
Oh,
can
yeah.
be if it's blended, right?
Yes.
With
Right.
some ventral energy, then you're in a kind of
Right.
a flow state. So it's not always
Right.
a complete
Which is my
shutdown.
understanding, right? Because
Yeah.
even the healthiest people would have that part of their just biological system to some extent.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you're right. Differentiation is like through addiction. If they're using pornography, for example, to go to dorsal, that's not regenerative
Right.
because that would not be connected
Right.
because flow is connected with safety, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I was going based on that. Sorry, I made the assumption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if guys coming in using addiction to substance or something to disconnect to go to dorsal, then I would say that that's more helping understand his narrative as survival and trying to invalidate.
Sure.
It makes sense why. Like, tell me more about that, and
I
then
just
helping
find that
him
men
move
are
it.
kind of more predisposed towards going towards the dorsal. If that's, I don't know if I'm allowed to make that generalization, but it does feel like men do gravitate towards that space a little bit quicker than women.
I'd say anecdotally, that's been my experience. I have to look at the actual research,
Yeah.
but anecdotally, I'd see that more so, shutting down
that's
or
like-
anger. A lot of fight though too.
But men are not allowed in our hypermasculine culture to feel vulnerability, to
Right.
express
Right.
vulnerability.
Right.
Whereas women are really, I mean, we're speaking very generally, but I think in terms of stereotyping and
Right.
the way that we're socialized, we are allowed to express more, a full range of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Carries with it a lot of misogyny
Yeah.
directed towards us around expressing vulnerability, right?
And a lot of feelings are dangerous or threats. So it makes sense why they have to go to dorsal, because if all these feelings are dangerous or threatening, that's not safe. So I have to go to dorsal in order to deal with that.
Yeah.
And which I find a lot of angry wives because you have a lot of avoidant husbands.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's the attachment stuff, right? It's like, I need you to see me
Right.
and hear me. And the more she does that
Yeah.
with the emotionality, he's like, that's a threat. The emotion
I'm under
is she's
attack.
not,
Yeah.
right? I'm under attack. So I need to shut down to like not make it worse because this is what's worked for me. And then they create that
Sure.
whole, that loop and the emotion focused couples
Feedback
therapy.
loop. Yeah.
Sue Johnson's work, right?
Right.
And all ours too, right?
Yeah.
Looking at working with the nervous system through couple dynamics. That
Mhm.
can be another embodied dialogue we'll do. It's also my next book. I wrote a chapter about that, Lily and Lucas, in my first book. Joseph, have a look there if you're intrigued by that, the way that those dynamics.
I am. This is your new book?
No, it's
Not the
the
addictions.
book I wrote in 2021.
Okay, so I have that one.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's the Felt Sense Polyvagal Dialogue.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank
we
you.
better go to follow along with our boundaries, keeping good boundaries. We're a little bit over. Rebecca's saying much love to you all, and I feel the same way. Much love to you all. And please come and join me on August 9th for the great, wonderful legend, Janina Fisher. It's going to be fun. And Travis, that was so great. More to come with Travis and Robert and Elizabeth and Mina and all our Felt Sense focusing polyvagal people that are here. Some I can't see on another screen. But be well and safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.